Hello, YouTubers. This is the fourth video in the fourth week in the OtripleS free open source schooling system that a lot of engineers around the world, the good-hearted, I call them the coalition of the good-hearted engineers, people that, dedicate some time of their day, to just do something without any payment, without any feedback, without any, having to be rewarded or even mentioned. These are like people that want to actually use the knowledge that they have accumulated through the years, to contribute to this project. There is also a whole group of engineers that just want to be a part of something great, and they also in the process they want to learn about the different patterns and different discussions and all the different ways people build software. Um, there's a big opportunity in OtripleS for financially disadvantaged people, in schools, students, and their families. We are trying to sell them on the hope that hopefully, as soon as this project comes out, there will be an opportunity that some of the schools around the world will start using the system and then redirect the funds that they had dedicated for the software of that schooling system to these financially disadvantaged students and families. So we basically just not even a mediator. We just say in our copyrights, if you look at every single file, you will notice that there's a big note in there say this is a coalition of the good-hearted engineers. This software is free to use as long as the funds are, dedicated to the poor, to these who need these funds. My hope from this whole project is that, maybe many, many years from now, one student will get an opportunity to have a meal on the table and be able to eat that meal and be able to focus and then change the world, gets an idea, become an innovator and takes humanity to the next level. If this happens, then all of this is worth it. If we can guarantee that every financially disadvantaged human being out there, a student, especially the young children, that they have meals on the table just by writing code, then we have done more than what this project ever aspires to be, and that's our reward. We really don't want anything back other than helping these people get to the next level in their lives and be able to provide for themselves and be able to study and have all what they need to focus on their own improvement and growth. Um, Now, the project itself is very, very eventful. Obviously, there are, like I said, there are all kinds of engineers out there. The project has really senior engineers, people that have, years and years of experiences, and there are those who are just, starting to just, scratching the surface, just trying to understand, how things work. There are people from all around the world. They come from all different backgrounds. And if you look into the issues section in here, there is so much good stuff in there that I can't even begin, like words can't even describe the amount of effort that people put into making sure that we have the right information and we are conducting the right discussions and that we're going in the right direction. One of the most interesting things that happened this week is the discussion around the architecture patterns. What's the high level architecture of the project? What direction are we going in? You'll notice here that people actually took the time, like Pavel, he took the time to actually put together a very detailed description of what's going on in this project. People think about, how can we improve the experience for the engineers? We don't want just to build something that has a beautiful goal. It has to be beautiful in and of itself. It has to be maintainable. It has to look good, right? It's not enough that you write something that works. It has to look right and it has to be beautiful in and out. And this is something that I try to tell everybody. Like when we push our code, if you look at our code has a very specific pattern. And I just added very recently this better code measurement. If you click on this better code measurement, you will see that we're hitting 8 out of 10, which is pretty high, of the things that makes a project a clean project. So our project is has clean code. It has automated tests. It's the code base is very small. It's the architecture components are balanced, and I'm gonna talk to you guys about these pieces, like why this project has very balanced architecture when it comes to the components that we're using. Something that I call the Florence pattern. What is the Florence pattern, and how did it come in play to make our stuff very balanced like that? There is also the part about couple architecture loosely. So because we're using dependency injection, things are actually subscribing to an interface instead of being very tightly coupled to a particular implementation of a particular class. There is separation of concern. You can see there is the student model and the teacher model, and we're going to be working this week on the course model, and I'm going to touch base a little bit on the discussion around that. We also have, the badge for keeping the unit interfaces small. We also have the simple units of code, writing simple units of code. The two things that we haven't really passed is the part where writing short units of code, and this is mainly if you go into this, I think it's just something about the balance of the try catch. And like for instance, if you say this is write short units of code, if you click on put student async, for instance, sometimes it errors out. Yeah, the idea here is basically, it's saying, the lines of code has to be small enough that they describe a story. And I couldn't agree on this more. We want to make sure that your code is visible within one block. So if you're looking at your code in here, obviously, I have a ginormous screen, so this is very visible to a lot of people. But if you go into, for instance, the student controller, and if you open up post, just for people to understand, if your code goes, let's take the put, for instance, right? The put is a really large portion of code, right? And what this analysis basically is saying, it's basically saying, it might be a little bit harder to capture all what's going on in your code, since it's taken around 15 or 20 lines of code. So if you go back um, to the analysis here, it says this is more than 15 lines of code. This is at most 15 lines of code. I find the measure is a little bit aggressive, but I totally understand. We also, writing the code once, there's some redundancies here and here between the code, but like we discussed in some of our architecture pattern, we're trying to stay away from having common methods and common classes. So when we separate all of this into microservices, it's going to be very hard to, it's kind of a coupling in a way, because if you're saying validate IDs, validate dates, validate statuses, but the statuses belong to a class that nobody else is using it. Some people might argue, well, why don't we try to find the common functionality amongst all of them? My question to them would be, what if you had a new module that doesn't necessarily use that one common function? Are you going to go and copy it everywhere? Or are you going to, just inherit it anyway and it becomes part of the package? It's a little bit of discussion. It really requires a back and forth, and that's why we have these channels. We open up these channels so people can, discuss and, have a debate, a healthy debate about what they understand, what they don't understand about the architecture, and what they think where there are like a room for improvement. So let's just go to our code here real quick and let's talk about some of the things that we have. Obviously, again, I really couldn't appreciate more the contributions. Our contributors this week are definitely larger than our contributors the week before, and I expect, people continue to contribute to the project and try to make sure the code is in a good, healthy state. You'll notice that we have a build pipeline in here. If you click on the build pipeline, you'll be able to see it's connected to Azure, and it actually kicks off the build pipeline, and you'll be able to see the health status. I will continue to add more things that, makes you feel better about where this project is headed, and, the code base that we're looking at and all that kind of stuff. But more importantly, so just few notes that I noticed, when it comes to contribution, you have to understand two things. Because we're trying to just put in one fundamental entity every week, right? There is no room here for missing your deadline. right? So please don't feel bad that someone else picked up your task and ran with it. And I want you to understand that this is not in no sh way, shape, or form. That's not us saying, hey, we're just gonna take away your work and your contribution and get it done. No, what we're basically saying is that we think that you probably have had a reason that you couldn't contribute this week, and a lot of people have, I really appreciate, the etiquette that a lot of people have when they're conducting themselves as professional engineers, when they're working with the task. Some people reached out to me say, hey, I'm really not going to be able to contribute this week. I'm just going to let you know. So, you could reassign the task to someone else, or you could do it yourself, or, you could just, manage the work this week. And this is the beautiful thing about us communicating with each other, that the whole idea of software engineering is actually a big social activity, because there is no way we can write coherent 8 out of 10 good project, better code project like this if we're not really communicating with each other. And while you will notice that a lot of people like Viral will be carrying the heavy loads, when it comes to, she's doing the heavy lifting in here, when it comes to, some people are not, exactly hitting their deadlines and whatnot. My expectation is that maybe probably 3, 4 sprints down the road, there will be more and more people that actually understand the standard and understand the guidelines, because a lot of these things are really, really similar. So it's a good training activity for you to be able to run in the entire CRUD operations for a particular entity and be able to write everything from the storage all the way up to the controller. And potentially after we're done with this, I'm going to walk you guys through building UI using Blazor, and I'm going to introduce you to a lot of good things like interacting with queues, machine learning, and OData and all that kind of stuff. So you'll be able to actually be a complete full stack engineer. This is a good learning opportunity for everybody. It doesn't matter how much experience you have in this industry. Things are changing all the time, which means that the more you contribute to code bases like this, the more you start conversations and you engage in conversations and you engage with coding and engage with discussions, the more it becomes easier for you to grow, because a lot of these things are out of your comfort zone. Like a lot of people would come in and say, no, we want to use this pattern, right? Or we want to use that pattern. And I'm like, okay, what do you think about this pattern? And let's go back and forth. And obviously there will be a back and forth because a lot of people want to see the big picture. And I understand, this type of engineers. They're the visionary engineers that want to see everything happen immediately at once. And I totally understand that. But there's also a lot of parts that should not be like, we could talk all the time, we could talk day in and day out, but until we actually come into the coding and actually start implementing the components and the features and designing the architecture, it's just gonna be talk, right? Everybody could just go and write a book, but when you're actually writing the code, like Linus Torvalds says, talk is cheap, show me the code. Talk is cheap, show me the code. And this is why I'm advising everyone, if you want to express yourself through code, just go ahead and contribute to the project, whether you want to discuss an issue or you want to discuss the model. And I really highly recommend you follow through with Mr. Ahmed here, because he's actually very familiar with building schooling systems. So he's kind of an engineer and a PM at the same time. Like, he's our stakeholder kind of a business guy, because he knows exactly what a schooling system looks like, right? But at the same time, he's also an engineer, and he's very, very experienced engineer. So he's gonna, contribute some ideas. One of the best things that, he talked about recently is that, when people were discussing what GitHub is acting weird today, but one of the things that he was discussing here, he was talking about, what are the standard names for a course, right? So if you go into a course model like this, I think we broke GitHub, possibly. Give me a second here. Let's see if we can load this. Let's go here. GitHub. Yeah, GitHub is down. We broke GitHub. Anyway, the idea here is that Ahmed has very, very, very good insight because he worked on a similar project in the past. So I really highly recommend to look closely at what he's recommending and, try to, just, discuss the ideas. And he's definitely, I can see him and his insights driving a lot of the future features in the software. But again, like I said, with projects like these, you'll see a lot of people, starting to show you how much power and energy they have, that they want to actually push in code and they want to actually, put in, like, I really was personally surprised looking at Pavel's, and I hope I'm saying your name right. His detailed contribution about what he really thinks about the high level architecture of OtripleS, what he really thinks needs to change, and all that kind of stuff. There's only one thing, like, this is his work right here. This is a piece of art right there, and I'm trying to discuss this stuff. There's also contributions in here around very same thing. There's a back and forth, between people in here, and I really appreciate the feedback, and I'll try to address as much as I can and learn as much as I can. But anyway, the bottom line here is that, continue the discussion, continue the engagement. There's definitely an opportunity for growth for all of us. Now, the one thing that's missing in the teachers model, I'm going to take this opportunity to show a lot of people, how, we can handle few things when it comes to, so there's one missing feature that we're missing, which is testing. Like, if you go do, first of all, I want everyone to learn how to do this. You do right click on Visual Studio and you go to Analyze Code Cleanup, and then you select Run Code Cleanup Profile 1. This is native. It just comes with Visual Studio. If you do that, it'll clean up your code. Like, for instance, in here, it'll do automatic cleanup. If I show you the difference here between the modified and unmodified, it basically cleans up empty lines. It's not even visible in here, like empty lines at the end of the file and all that kind of stuff. If you have something that doesn't look right, it'll just go and clean it up for you. If you're using, and this is very important, go to your tools and click options, and then in the system area, you want to make sure that you have selected place system directives first when sorting usings. Place system directives first when sorting usings. This is very, very important, because when you run your code cleanup, you want to make sure that anything related system go all the way at the top, and then all the other usings directives are coming after that. So this is very important. Now, one last thing. So I'm looking at all the tasks in the teacher. Let's go back to the teacher model in here. There's only one missing task, which is get all teachers, right? And for a lot of people that contribute to this code, I'm just going to pretend that I don't know what I'm doing here, right? I'm a new person to the project, and I don't know how it, let's say, for all of a sudden Hassan assigned this task to you, and you're expected to finish this within 24 hours, and you are expected to understand, what the quality is, or the features that you're trying to build, right? So one missing thing is select all teachers. And let's say I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a new to the person to the project, and I don't know. So I'm just gonna go in here and look at the featured logic. And I see in here, if you do Control MO, you'll see in here this says should post teacher async, and this guy should put teachers async. So the first thing you want to do, if the task that you're supposed to work on is basically select all or get all teachers, um, if you don't know anything at all and you've never done this before, now you have the opportunity to go back to similar code that does exactly the same thing and just do it, right? So in here you will notice, I don't know if I think Viral wrote this. For instance, this is a one-liner. It should go like this. But here's an example. It basically, Viral went in here and she said create a bunch of random students, right? And from these random students, this is the input students. So this is random and this is input. And out of these input, we're creating a new student. Now, obviously, when the type is not clear, you probably want to say student like this. So the type is clear for you, especially in these iterations, right? You can't say var if the right side is not clear, right? So for every student, go ahead and post that student. So now I have a list of students that I have posted to the API. Now that I have these expected students, I can go in here and get all these students. And then in here, basically, I don't even think comparing the count is a good idea if you're running against a live database. So you don't want to do that. But what you want to do is that you're getting all the students. This is all the students. I got all the students. And then I'm going to pick up, because you can't compare one to one and you can't do contains, all you have to do is just go in here and say actual student is go select an actual student from these actual students. So you got all the students from the API, and then you went and said, does this actual student matches the expected student. So you pulled in the expected student from that list, and then you saw that it matches, and if it matches, just delete it. You just delete from the API, so you're cleaning it up. Now, someone might ask me, why don't we compare the count? It's very simple, and someone brought this up. So a lot of people said why your acceptance tests are not just running in a database in memory, right? So you just run a database in memory, and then you just shut down the database and start over. The problem with that is that I want to be able to run this against a live instance in the cloud or whatever you're deploying your code, right? I want to be able to run this against, an instance that has real data in it. And then I want to be able to roll back and clean all of that up in the real instance. And there is a reason for that, because you could spin up your acceptance test, or your acceptance test will say, yeah, you're good to go, against an in-memory database. But what if you have an actual issue with the connection with the real database? Something is wrong with adding students or removing students, whatever the case may be. This is where this comes in very, very handy. And that's why we build these acceptance tests as self-contained, self-deleting, self-cleaning piece of information. They're very modulus and they're very, very precise. So you don't have to look around to see what's going on and where your data went, right? Now, there is there's always the off chance that some call has failed. And what are you going to do about that? And that's just another thing that we're going to talk about when it comes to logging and monitoring tests and all that. So anyway, this looks like a clean piece of code for me with all the modification that I've made. I'm just going to run everything. Look at the amazing work that people did. We wrote 151 unit and acceptance tests. That's some real high quality engineering there. Not my testimony, it's the testimony of the code cleanliness measure out there. But okay, so I'm a new guy to the project and I don't know what's going on. The simplest thing in the world is that you can go and learn what's happening in here and then try to do it on your own, right? So I'm just gonna go here and say fact public async task should get all teachers async. So this is your basically acceptance test. We have a given, when, and then here's our three pieces of writing a unit test, and then I want an IEnumerable of teachers. Let's create random teachers. Create random teachers. Okay, someone might tell me here we don't have create random teachers hidden. That's the easiest thing in the world. Let's just create one. We have the filler. We could throw a random number in there and everything is good and dandy. First of all, just for everyone, fillers are internal to use for the root file. So you want to keep those at the bottom. Fillers always stay at the bottom. All the fillers stay at the bottom like that. And then this one is not just a filler. This one actually is creating something, so that stays at the top. The things that you're using in other files stay at the top, right? The things that you're only using in the same file as private methods, keep those at the bottom, right? So your code is symmetrical and clean, and you know where to find what when you're looking at it, especially when it gets a little bit complex. So in here I have create random teacher, right? So let's make multiple of these. So teacher, here IEnumerable teacher, create random teachers. There's bunch of random teachers. Create random teacher filler. And then in here, if you say create, you can pass in a random number. So let's say in here, get random number. I don't have the random number function in here, and that's fine. Let's go in here and add a function that says create a random number, or get a random number rather. We don't create numbers, we're just getting them, right? So let's put that guy in here. Private static integer, static because it's stateless. It's not really based on any state or any instance. And then this is an integer, and in here say get random number, right? And out of the number we can say int range. This is coming from Dynamics. And then you want to use your minimum 2 and max 10, right? Get value. Okay, these are arbitrary numbers, but when we say a number, we're trying to get multiple. So if I generate 1, it doesn't quite convey the value of being a list of things, right? And this is, like that. Okay, so now what we have to do is just get random numbers. So now I have this method, And this method in here basically returns a random list of teachers. It can be 5 this time, the next time you write it's gonna be 4 or 3, whatever the case may be, right? So we have that stuff, it's great. Now let's go back to our logic. And here is IEnumerable teacher input teachers, which is coming from random teachers. Now for each one of those teachers, so for each teacher, this is the input teacher. In input teachers, I'm gonna go ahead and create a teacher, right? So I want to make a call. So await this that broker, right? OtripleS broker post teacher async, and here is your input teacher. Good. So this post teachers, I'm creating a bunch of teachers. Great. Now let's go back and get all these teachers, right? So this is my IEnumerable of teachers, and this is here the actual teachers. This is coming from where? Again, from the API. So the teachers broker, then get all teachers, right? And this is a little tiny mistake here. This should be get all teachers async, right? Because you're making an asynchronous call, right? So it has to be get all teachers async. Did we do the same thing in the students? Yeah. So there you go. So this is async, right? So asynchronous, it has to end with async. This is just a coding standard. All right. So we have the actual teachers. Now what do we want to do with that? We want to validate that those teachers, the actual teachers, actually match the teachers that we pulled in, and then delete each and every one of them, which is very simple. I could go in here and say for each, and this is the I could even do this. You know, I could make another one, which would be the expected teachers, which comes from the input teacher, like this. Like this. All right. So I have the expected. So for each teacher, expected teacher in expected teachers, like this. And now I have this list of actual teachers. So this is teacher, returned. This is actual teacher equal, and then actual teachers, right? Single. We know it's there, right? Teacher. There you go. I think Visual Studio froze on me. Let's give it a second. There you go. Am I going too fast? Teacher.id equal the expected. Actually, I think you could just do this. Expected teacher.id. Would it work this way? Oh, it doesn't like that. Okay. Let's bring this guy down a little bit so the lines are not. If your line's on over 120, you probably shouldn't. So this is teacher.id equal this guy. Right, I wonder if we have find in here that would even make it. No, it doesn't. Okay. So single. So we have that actual teacher, and then we just want to verify. So actual teacher should, this is coming from Fluent Assertions, should be equivalent to expected teacher. So that's one. And then we want to delete that stuff. So in here, we're going to go and say await this dot broker dot delete teacher by ID async, which is going to be the actual teacher.id. Done. Right? So if our get functionality works, this should be pretty straightforward. And don't worry that you can't type or imagine the process of testing this way, you know, yourself. It's just training. I've done this thousands, literally thousands of times. And you will too, and you will be great, and you will be the best engineer out there. All you have to do is be patient, be open-hearted and minded for feedback, and keep working, and good things will happen. So, okay, let's see. I don't know. This is just a theory. Is this thing gonna work? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's find out. and it passed, right? It passed because it's doing what's expected and it's only deleting the things that it created. And this is what I really like about these acceptance tests is that it doesn't matter what instance it's running against. Let it be in production, let it be local, let it be in memory. It'll create its own world and then collapse that word again and clean it up and move on to the next thing. So this is that. Let me go ahead and type in here a commit and let me put in here the name of the test because acceptance tests happen after the fact. Unlike unit tests, then this guy will be passed. See how the commits work? You write in the test. If the test failed, you put the test name and then you make it fail. And then the next commit would be writing the test and then make it pass. That's just how it is. So okay, so let's do that. Let's push that, and that's done, right? So we done this piece. So that means remote repository. We have a little problem. Let's sync. Maybe there's something I missed. Compressing object 114. All right, everything is pushed now. So let's go back to our code and let's mark this story as done. GitHub is done today. Let's try this again. Okay. So this is, sorry, this is the teacher model, right? So what we can do here is just close that model finally. Just call that model is done. So this was get all acceptance tests. I'm just gonna go here and say overdue, done, and there we go. I don't know if it's going to update that or not. Something's really weird with GitHub. But anyway, something about the contributions that I want people while it's working on that. Something about the contributions. Here's a new model of contributions that we're going to be working with. People who have successfully contributed in one sprint to the code base are definitely going to get an assignment in the week after, right? People who have had an assignment in the current sprint and they couldn't and they reached out to me and they said, hey, I can't, it's just as good as they have contributed because they had their excuses, they had their reasons, so they will definitely get an assignment in the week after. People who have not contributed, have had an assignment, have not contributed, and have not reached out, I won't be able to assign any more tasks to them, but they still have an opportunity to contribute. And the reason and the way for that would be if someone have missed their deadline, then that's an opening window for anyone to come in and contribute and push that code, right? I want you to understand something very well. Just because this is an open source project, just because there's no funding, just because of all of these reasons, it doesn't mean that the quality has to be less, and it doesn't mean that we can delay deliverables. We have to be very, very strict about our deliverables. Every week we will finish up an entire feature. There's over 20, 30 contributors, 30 engineers from all over the world. That's a massive, very powerful engineering team. If I could just, explain to you how much funding it would take for just some startup to have 30 engineers of the quality and capacity and experience that the engineers on this project are, it would count in the millions, because it's a lot of experience, a lot of work, and there's a lot of technologies that are being there that requires years and years and years of experience and background. All right, so let's go back to this thing. I think it's still breaking, and that's very unfortunate. Let's go into the classroom and let's talk about, yeah, GitHub is done. GitHub is done today. Let's just go. Okay, so GitHub is physically done, right? It has issues and it's experiencing interruptions and all that kind of stuff. All right. All right. Since that's the case, we will just talk about a little bit about the assignments and contributions. Obviously, you will notice, like slowly but surely, the people that are contributing to this project, they're getting more and more of a generic responsibilities. Meaning, like for instance, Varal this week, she's going to be taking care of all the brokers' operations. Ahmed will be taking of most of the controller's operations. The services is where all the work is, and that's why I will never ever assign more than one method, one feature in a service to the same person. It's never going to happen. Someone is going to have to, out of the goodness of their heart, someone is going to have to go and say, okay, this is what I want to do with with my life. I want to build two methods, and I want to go do that. Needless to say, Viral is one of the people that actually like to go and do that stuff, and I really couldn't be more appreciative. If you see someone struggling with something, just reach out. We have a Getter channel, and in our Getter channel, you'll be able to basically go and say, okay, is there any way I can help? Is there any way I can help? Um, this week we're going to be discussing the classroom. And the classroom is going to be a little bit different than a course, right? We talked about the course, but we're discussing, so there's a model or an entity that we're working on, actively pushing code on, and there's a model and entity that we're discussing. And a lot of people have asked me this. They said, we want to know the big picture. What's the big picture? There is no big picture. There is no plan. What we really do is that we try to identify the components of the system that would constitute a school, and then step by step we're trying to find relationships between these entities. And sometimes we might need, to expand our vision a little bit, and sometimes we need to, look through that, narrow tunnel in order for us to be able to, build something that makes sense, right? A lot of people, and I can guarantee you this right now, through 20 years being in the software industry myself, what I've noticed the most about a lot of people is that they will build a big, huge plan that spans over a year or so. And I can guarantee you 90% of that plan will change. Instead, we want to think about the here and the now, looking only further enough, if we're modularizing our software, if we're building it right, and you will notice this in the code that we're building, each and every feature is its own project, its own platform, its own little solution, right? And that feature may or may not reach out to other features, and it may or may not. It depends on how it's going to work, right? But, thinking about some 30, 40, 50 entities down the road, and trying to understand all of this at once. That's just waterfally mindset that I can guarantee you right now. Like I've been working like throughout my entire career, there's been over 31 projects that I worked on end to end. And I can guarantee right now most of that stuff will change, right? And that's something business doesn't understand. Sometimes people who are not, very familiarized with how software works don't understand. They want to know the picture, the full picture, and all of it right here, right now. That's just unrealistic. What we're gonna do is that we build and explore as we go. It's like playing one of those old time, Age of Empires real-time strategy games. You're just unraveling and unveiling, the clouds, the dark clouds as you go and as you expand your empire. It's pretty much the same thing. We're gonna deal with the here and the now and what works for us and what model we want to work with. We know we want to build a schooling system, and we know that schooling system has a student. So let's learn everything around that student. Let's build that student and then move on as we go. This way, the time and effort of the engineers going into understanding the plan and the project and all that kind of stuff is very tied to what they are going to immediately work on. Some corporates and companies, they will say we want 3 sprints worth of work. And I still personally think it's all right, but it's still very, very well so subject to change, right? Which means any time and effort that is spent on planning something that far in the future is kind of a wasted time. And that's why a lot of engineers really hate meetings and hate long planning and organization meetings, simply because a lot of that stuff change once you hit the ground and you start actually writing code. Anyway, I'm gonna give GitHub one more chance to see. Yeah, GitHub is down, and I'm sorry about that. But feel free to reach out. There's a lot of things that have changed. I've changed a lot of things in the description of the project and all that kind of stuff. So feel free to reach out and feel free to ask questions. And thank you for watching, and thank you for your contributions. You make the world a better place. You're changing the world as you go. And a lot of us are very caught up in our jobs, and are very caught up in with our families, and very caught up with our worlds and our businesses and all that. It's very, very seldom that people are given the opportunity, are willing to take the opportunity of doing something just for good. The software that we build is going to help people we will never meet. And that's just really, really amazing. It tells me a lot more about the coalition of the good-hearted engineers. That's you and everyone who wants to do the same thing. And like I said, never stop inviting people to come into the project. I think we have, great engineers, but the more the merrier. The more people we have, the faster we're going to achieve this goal. Um, we want to see how a project like this would fold out. It would be a great story to tell and a great experience to understand and to actually learn from down the road. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to your contributions and your work with the OtripleS and the classroom model, and I look forward to your contribution in the course model. And let me know if you have any questions or comments or concerns. Thank you so much. Have a good day.